And joining us right now, great pleasure to welcome William McDonald. He is the obituaries editor of the New York Times, and the new book, The Obits Annual 2012, is just out, edited by William McDonald. He joined us today by a telephone. William, thanks for being with us. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
How does one become an obituary writer? I'm sure that's not what you go to journalism school to do it the first time out. I know it's interesting work, but how do you get into that?
Yeah, well, you're right. It's not something I grew up wanting to be. I fell into it, you might say. I was in the paper. I worked for the paper for many years and worked in various departments, arts journalism and national news, some investigative work. And this job came open in '06, and I was intrigued by it. And I've always loved history and biography, and I raised my hand, and I was fortunate enough to be selected, and lo and behold, it turned out to be probably one of the more fascinating jobs I've ever had, so I don't regret it at all.
Well, what is it, do you think? I mean, I guess we all sort of know in a sense, but what is it about reading the Obits column, whether it's in the Times or your local paper, people you don't really know, that fascinates people? Have you thought about that, or do you just write them and don't worry about that part?
Well, you just think about it as you go. You do write them as you go, but it is it is our job and what we do. But certainly, you think about what is it, because we get a very positive response. We have pretty devoted readership. People tend to say it's the first thing they read when they open a paper. So it obviously touches people. I think that it tells them a little bit about their own lives, the era that they grew up in. You'll see someone who you may have watched on television when you were young, and you want to read that story. It brings you back to that, the personal connection. In some cases, it's just a window on an era that maybe you never knew much about, but they're fascinating in that sense, and they're actually stories of lives. They have beginnings and endings, and you can actually chart a life and see how they got to be what they were and what they did and how they contributed. And I think we're all kind of interested in other people's lives in some way, and in a way, it's a kind of formalized way of presenting it, to a readership. Here are all the details of this particular life, and I think we're all kind of interested in one another.
Yeah, many biographies in a sense.
In a way, they are many biographies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Of course, this particular book, the Obits Annual 2012, more of the well-known people that have passed away. I was surprised. Some of the people that have passed away in the last year or so, famous people or well-known people, I did not know that had passed away. So it's kind of daunting when you look at that, how many famous people have gone.
It's amazing when you do look at it like that in one book form. I mean, we do them day to day, but when you put them together, you realize what a loss. The world has lost so many, entertainers, musicians, politicians. Maybe that's not so bad, but that was a joke, of course. But sports heroes, scientists, you name it. It's just an amazing parade of talent and brain power that we lose, and every year, it happens. It's life.
Yeah, one sports icon you mentioned, Bob Feller, passed away, although he had a good life. I mean, he was in his 90s. I mean, obviously sad when anybody goes, but I mean, he had a long life, and you wrote his biography, his obit, I would imagine too, right?
We did his. In fact, he also sat down for an interview with us, for a videotaped interview, and you can actually watch it on our website, on the Obit page. We have a series of videos that we do on occasion with various people who are willing to sit down and talk about their lives, and we promise them that we won't broadcast this and disseminate it in any way until they die. So they understand that's the proviso of that interview, and we hope that they'll open up and say things that maybe they've never said publicly before. But they're fascinating anyway, and Bob Feller is one of those. He actually gave a great interview. Yeah,
I've seen clips of him. He's an interesting man. Obviously served in the war and had a lot of opinions, so interesting guy to talk to. Obviously with Obits, particularly famous people, you have to pre-write a lot of them ahead of time, don't you, to kind of get it ready in case, sadly, if they die unexpectedly, right?
That's right, we do, and we have about 1,500 on file, and we're always adding to it every week, maybe one or two, maybe more. So we have to do that. Yeah, it's to digest an entire life and to do it on a deadline. Say, if someone were to die unexpectedly and have to reconstruct a life like that on deadline, it's tough, and you want as much time as you can to do the research, to talk to to people and then to simply write the narrative, in a way that will be compelling and interesting. So, we do as much of that as we can. The internet has made it even more necessary because, now with some guys, if it's a major figure and that's news, and the website wants to report it right away, and they say, well, where's the obit? Do we have one in advance? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But anyway, it adds to the urgency of it for us.
How do you kind of go about it when you do the research on somebody that's still living? Do you call them directly, or do you kind of work around it? I mean, they probably don't want you to call them, do they?
Not normally. We do both, though. We certainly work around them, and because in most cases, these are prominent people. There's a lot of material out there about them. But we do try to reach them if they're willing, and sometimes we'll go to someone, maybe an associate, or a family member. We may not want to go directly at first, but maybe feel them out and say, do you think so-and-so would be interested in talking to us? Or sometimes we'll just go directly, and, you'd be surprised. Some people, of course, are appalled at the idea, and it's understandable. Others don't want us to, they're sort of philosophical about it, and they think, well, I can have a word in my own obit. I can get the last word, and so they'll actually sit down and talk. And we've had cases like that where, someone had sat down, and in fact, there was one. He was a figure in the Eisenhower administration. That's how old he was. He was Eisenhower's chief economic advisor, and our reporter actually called him, and he said, "Yeah, come on down. I feel like chatting in a farm in Maryland." And so the reporter went down, and they talked about the Eisenhower years, and within 2 weeks he was dead. And he had the obituary written with his voice in it, and by sheer coincidence, he didn't survive much longer.
Interesting. I guess perhaps the most well-known person that passed away in the last year, or at least in the showbiz end, was Elizabeth Taylor. Tony Curtis also died, but I guess Elizabeth Taylor kind of, overwhelmed or went into different areas other than entertainment. She was more of an icon, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. She was on the front page in a giant picture, and we had hers obviously written in advance as well. But yeah, it's just amazing, the number of people who didn't survive the year. Peter Falk and Jane Russell in the movies and such.
Right.
Don Meredith. Harmon Killebrew. The list goes on, and it's sobering in some ways.
Yeah, and also unlikable people like Bin Laden. So, but you have to write it anyway, don't you? I mean, it's.
We do. We write about the bad guys and the good guys. Because he made news. That's part of our criteria. Is if you made. The rule of thumb is if you made news in life, your death is probably going to be news as well to the world. And he was a villain, but he was certainly a prominent one. So we had to, and we certainly did his story. Yeah,
well, it's a fascinating book called The Obits, Annual 2012, from the New York Times. We're talking with William McDonald, who is the Obit editor. And when you have a website, give people a chance to go to that website and get the book.
Well, the book is available in stores. It's available on Amazon, and the publisher has a site at workman.com, WORKMAN, where it's also available. And I think you'll find it.
Great, William. Pleasure to talk to you. I grew up in New York, so the Times was always a part of our household growing up, and it's good to have a chance to talk to you. Thanks for being with us.
Nice talking to you. Thank you.
Okay.